Welcome to the Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day. Today's tip: 5 employment law changes set to hit the workplace in 2025. With several state and local laws going into effect and a new president about to take office, workplaces of all sizes are sure to experience a 2025 policy shakeup. And yet, a lot of business owners around the country aren't aware of these changes to employment law, says Alexis D'Amato, Director of Government Affairs for the advocacy organization Small Business Majority. This means they're also unaware of how these legal changes will impact their businesses. And even for the most knowledgeable founders, she says, it really will take a village to comply with all these changes coming down the pipeline in 2025. Here are 5 policy changes and legal battles employers should keep an eye on this year. 1. More and better pay transparency. As of 2024, 9 U.S. states and 7 jurisdictions required some degree of pay transparency, according to HR Morning. But this year, similar laws will take effect in Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Vermont, and 10 more states are currently considering similar legislation. Because each pay transparency law is slightly different, it'll become more challenging for multi-state companies to ensure they're compliant, says Emily Dickens, head of government affairs at the Society for Human Resource Management. Her advice? Find the toughest standard in the country and figure out a way to provide the information necessary based on that standard. But 2025 won't just see pay transparency become more commonplace. It will also become more accurate, says Gartner director Augustus Vickery. While many pay transparency laws require companies to publish a good faith salary range, Vickery says some companies have taken advantage of that language. Many Tesla job listings, for example, list salary ranges of $100,000 to $300,000, which he says is obviously not the spirit of the law. But as more states enact legislation around pay transparency, Vickery expects salary range postings will get more real. 2. Higher minimum wages. According to a report by the National Employment Law Project, 21 states and 48 cities or counties raised their minimum wage on January 1st. 5 more states and 23 cities or counties will do the same later this year. Nearly 80% of these jurisdictions will have a minimum wage of $15 per hour or above following the hikes. Vickery says companies can comply with these new laws using a hyper-local approach, which would mean ensuring each job meets the minimum wage requirement in its state. Or you can manage your pay holistically, using one pay range for all employees in the U.S., whether they're based in Arkansas or New York State. Vickery recommends the second option because it allows your organization to own the narrative and be clear about its values. But not every company can afford that luxury, especially smaller businesses and those in tight margin industries, who will be impacted the most by these laws, according to Dickens. For these organizations, the only way to prepare for the change in legislation is to tighten your belt. Be smart about how you spend the largest line item in your budget, Dickens says, and consider how you can stretch your resources the most to remain competitive. 3. Simpler contractor classifications. Last January, the Department of Labor issued a controversial final rule on how to classify workers as independent contractors. The ruling walked back a Trump-era classification system, which emphasized just 2 factors: the employer's level of control and the worker's ability to make a profit or loss. Instead, per the new ruling, employers need to weigh 6 factors. Experts say Trump's administration will likely reverse the DOL ruling. Employers are in favor of this, according to Jim Plunkett, partner at employment law firm Ogletree Deakins. Many in the business community think that this current Obama-era regulation is a little bit too blurry and potentially hamstrings independent contractors. 4. New workplace safety standards. Experts at the law firm Fisher & Phillips predict that the Trump administration will also revisit occupational safety and health administration rules about workplace safety. The first, a 2024 ruling that gave employees the right to appoint a representative to accompany OSHA officials on workplace inspections. Some employers will welcome a Trump reversal, says Plunkett. They find the rule offensive, he says, because there's no restrictions on who can join the OSHA inspector. And there's no limitations on what this individual, who has no relation to the employer, can do once they're inside the employer's facilities. Fisher & Phillips also expects the incoming administration to spike a proposed rule by OSHA, which would set a federal heat safety standard, requiring employers nationwide to create and implement heat safety plans. Plunkett, however, believes it's a little too early to tell where the administration will fall on this issue because of Trump's recent friendliness with unions. 5. No increase to the overtime pay salary threshold. Last year saw quite a bit of upheaval around overtime pay, specifically around the salary white-collar workers need to be considered exempt. A Biden-era DOL ruling instituted 2 increases to that salary threshold. The first, which set the standard at $844 per week, went into effect in July 2024. The second increase, to $1,128 per week, was slated for this month, but in November, a federal Texas court struck down the DOL's rule, returning the salary threshold to $684 per week. And while the agency can appeal that decision in 2025, Dickens says the second threshold increase is not going to happen under the Trump administration. What's less clear is whether the Trump administration will propose a new rule of its own around overtime pay. Employers have been confused by all this legal back and forth, Plunkett says. By declaring the DOL rule unlawful after the first increase was already in effect, the court is putting the toothpaste back in the tube, he says. Without a new ruling, some uncertainty could remain. That's it from Inc. This article was written by Annabelle Burba. You can find more articles from Annabelle and other business leaders at Inc.com. Check back tomorrow morning for another tip from Inc.